Okay, time to cover the motor swap. Now, we've talked about this before. We're going to do a little something extra this time, but basically the bottom line is the motors that come in these cars, they're just too hot. I've taxed some of these out well over 28,000 RPM, 27 to 28,000, and it's just too much for these smaller cars, for these Legends. It just it doesn't do them any good. At least that's the general consensus. Most of you feel that way. But you know, Scalextric, they're just going to keep doing it. So that's fine. At least we have a motor. I realize that some of these people out there just collect these and never race them. But for those of us who do, be a shame if you didn't actually. But we do have options. Now, I'm going to go to the new Predator motor. Those of you that have bought motors before, such as the Minnow, such like that, same motor, but it has a longer motor shaft, so it fits a wider variety of cars. I bench tested this one. It's right at 18,745. That's no load RPMs. It will probably go up to 19 with a little bit of break-in. There's not much in the brush department here on these smaller motors, but you know, it will break in a little bit. But there's a big difference, actually almost a 10,000 RPM difference. And I have to tell you that on my track, non-magnet, that just improves these cars. Just they run a lot smoother. They're a lot nicer, at least to me. So anyway, we're going to discuss the motor swap right now, a couple of different methods, and I hope it helps you. Okay, to remove the motor, well, there's no getting around it. You're going to have to get out your soldering gun. You're going to have to heat this up and remove these connections right here, and then we're going to pop the motor out. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the pinion, the sleeve, its relationship with the gear, the crown gear here. We've covered this before, but we're going to do it again. And the reason that we're going to do it again is I keep getting questions. And the main question is, why do we need that sleeve? Well, this sleeve is what keeps your gear mesh correct inside your crown gear. This gap right here on your boss in your crown gear is set for a 2mm motor shaft. But the motor shaft on these slimline motors is 1.5. So if you don't sleeve it, you will have this. The motor goes back and forth too much. You won't get a right gear mesh. You're going to burn up some gears. It happens. So you have to have that sleeve. Now, on the Scalextric motor, if you'd like to reuse the one that it came with, it's easy enough to do. Like I've shown in the past, I've been able to pop this sleeve off. But if you really don't care about using this gear again, and even if you do, you can usually just take a flat tip screwdriver and press it, and out it comes. Pretty simple. You'll notice the splines on this motor shaft. So there you go. And you can see that the sleeve popped right off, and there it is. You can reuse this sleeve. So we normally don't reuse the plastic pinion. We upgrade. So for the Predator, for the new motor, I'm going to be using the slotted pinion. This is a 9-tooth pinion with a 1.5mm shaft. Now the part number for that is SIPI 559 0-15. Yes, not 0, but that's the part number. I have it listed there below. So you can also use MR Slot Car makes a pinion, and its part number is MR4109. So if the slotted are out of stock, you can use a MR Slot Car. Also, tubing. If you happen to lose this tiny sleeve, which a lot of people do, don't panic. Slot Car Corner does carry the stainless tubing. You have to cut it, of course, but they do carry the tubing. It's just the 2 millimeter with a 1.5 millimeter inside diameter, and the part number for that is SST-003, and we'll show you how to use that in a second. But anyway, we've managed to save this shaft, or the sleeve right here, but I am going to show you how to use this. So our next step is, as you can see, we have motor shaft length here to trim. So we're going to measure, we're going to trim that shaft, get it to where it is exactly where it needs to be to fit into the gear system in the car. And then we're going to talk about installing the pinion and the sleeve. Okay, so I've installed the stock Scalextric motor back in here just to show you what we're talking about for motor shaft length. As you can see, and I hope you can see, that there's a slight amount of distance here between the end of the motor shaft and the inside of the crown. Just a few thousandths right there, that little bitty gap. So you can go over a little bit, but not too much. But the other reason I'm showing you this is, again, you'll notice, without that sleeve, this is the kind of play you get against your gear. You will find some people that say you don't need it, and I'm just going to say that I totally disagree. It's my story. I'm sticking to it. That's all I got to say about that. Sleeve this motor, okay, that motor shaft. That way you get proper gear mesh. But now I'm going to show you how we're going to get the shaft length so we can cut our new one and get it installed. So the easiest way to determine the length of the shaft is use your caliper. If you don't have one, get one. If you're going to start doing modifications on slot cars, it's worth it. So anyway, you're going to go against the face of the bushing housing right here, this little protrusion coming out of the motor right there, and you can just eyeball it, put your caliper there, and it'll tell you, well, 6.78. It's usually 6.78, 6.75, but it does vary on the car you're working on. Sometimes the shaft is longer, sometimes it's shorter, but most times that's right where it needs to be. So now that we know the length, now we can trim our new motor. Okay, now that we have our measurement, now we do the same thing on the new motor. We're going to come over here, put it exactly where it was before on the old motor. We get our distance, take a Sharpie, just make you a little line mark right there. Now, always go a little bit proud. Don't worry about going too long, because we're going to test fit. Because if you cut it too short, well, that's about the end of the day. If you cut it long, you can always file it or sand it down to make it fit. In other words, it's easier to take away than to add to. So anyway, we've got this right here. We're going to mark it, and now we're going to cut it. When it comes to trimming the motor shafts, there's nothing better than a good old Dremel. And I like the standard little cutting disc. It's really thin, and it'll go right through that really fast. So we're going to cut a little proud. We're going to have our file. We're going to test fit it in the chassis, make sure it's not rubbing the boss in the crown, and then we're ready to install the pinion. Once you've cut the motor shaft, one thing you need to remember is that when you cut through something like this, you're always going to leave some burrs, some edges here. That's just the way it goes. And you don't want those there when you go to put the pinion on, because it could stop the pinion from going on smoothly. Could be way too tight. You don't want that. So what I usually do is, with the Dremel running, is I just take the motor and I just kind of rotate it here on the face like that as it's running, and I smooth it down. You can use a file, sandpaper, whatever, but just make sure you deburr it. I'm going to include this alternate method of cutting the tubing. I've shown this before in the original Lotus 25 review that we did, but I had some feedback from some folks, and they found it very challenging, to say the least, of using a razor saw. I can understand that, I suppose. First of all, these are easy to find. Hobby Lobby, online, Amazon. I mean, they're not that expensive, but it's pretty simple to do this. You just, you hold the tubing and you just start dragging it across until you'll start to cut pretty fast, and then you can continue to do that. You don't have to go forward with the biting motion of the blade because it can get hung up as soon as you break through here. But this does work. It's a little bit more difficult than the Dremel. Takes a little bit longer, but it does work. Alright, so we've completed that. You might notice just from what you can see right here that the motor shaft on the new motor is slightly longer than the original. I told you that we had a little bit to work with. So this new measurement, and we'll just come right up to it right now, and we'll go here, is right around 7.42. So you see, we did cut a little bit longer. However, that's why we test fit. And I knew that we had a little bit of room, as we showed you earlier. So we're going to take our motor and we're going to snap it in place to test fit, because that's what you do. And as you can see, there's still a gap there between the end of the motor shaft right there and the inside of the crown. So it is not rubbing, it's free and clear. We are good to go. So now we can install our pinion and our sleeve. Before we install the pinion, it's not something you have to do. You can do this by sight, but you'll notice where the crown gear is here, the edge of the crown gear, and you want your pinion gear to be as centered against these teeth as possible. So what I do is, again, I'll get a Sharpie. I'm using red this time so you can actually see. And I just go just a little bit past the crown and I make a line. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the pinion and I'm going to cover that line up, and I'll bet you we got our pinion right where we want it to be. Let's see. Now to install the pinion, I can tell you right now, I know they're not giving them away. I can already hear it already. I know some of you have checked the prices, but the slotted pinion press extractor is just a top of the line tool. Very good quality. I like it. Other companies make some slotting plus and stuff, but I don't really know how long I've had this. I think everything was in black and white when I got this thing, but it does the job. So now we're going to press this on. Like I told you, we're going to go right here, cover up our little mark, and we're going to see where we're at. Okay, so if you don't mark it and you're just doing this by sight, again, you're going to test fit as you go. You snap the motor in, you test it. And I didn't install the pinion all the way to show you this, is that when you put it in, you'll notice that you feel this a lot of pressure, a lot of friction, and that's because that your pinion isn't pressed on far enough, and it's rubbing the boss flange right there. It's pressed against here, and that's what's causing this friction. So now you got to pull your motor out and press it on a few more thousandths. All right, just about another half turn on the press, and we are solid gold, brass, whatever. Here we are. Nice clearance, no rubbing. The only thing you're feeling is the friction of the motor turning. Nice and smooth, no contact. Now it's time to get our sleeve on. Okay, so if you've managed to salvage the sleeve from the Scalextric motor, you can just go ahead and install it and press it on. It could be a very tight fit. Sometimes you can just get it started, then pick your motor up, press it down. You'll hear it pop in, you're good to go. You really do not need any adhesive. If you're going to use adhesive or you just feel you need to, then I suggest using a Loctite, something mild like a Loctite, or even some clear nail polish. That's a good adhesive. But please stay away from super glue. Okay? It's just a dangerous thing. You can put too much, it can flow back behind the pinion and really ruin your day. So, like I said, you don't really need it. That sleeve isn't going to go anywhere. It's positioned inside the boss of the crown. I've installed them with no adhesive and no problems. Now, that's if you save the sleeve. But what if you didn't? We'll talk about that. Okay, so let's say you have to cut your own sleeve with the tubing that you've purchased because you've lost the other sleeve, which many of us do, and it's really hard to kind of cut that small little piece after you measure it there. See, you don't have a lot to work with. So one way to make it easy is to just put it over the original motor shaft, and that'll help hold it in place, and then you can cut it. Now always cut it a little bit longer. It isn't going to hurt anything. We'll show you that in just a second. So you can put it over the motor, or you can take your toothpick and you can put it inside the tubing. That'll help hold it, and you can cut it there. One of my favorite methods is kind of cheating here. This is good old-fashioned duct tape, and you can just take the tubing and you mark it and you cut it, and it'll drop down and it'll stick on the tape. So there's several different ways you can get this done, but what we're going to do is I've already cut a piece and it's a little bit long, just to show you that if you cut it too long, it's not a problem. Okay, so you installed the tubing there. It's a little bit long. Don't worry about it. That's fine. Just get a flat file. You see the end of your tubing right there. You can tell when you're flush, and just start dragging it across here, sanding it down. You're not going to hurt anything. Not a lot of pressure is needed, and pretty soon you're going to have it flush and ready to install. Pretty easy. Okay, we are all finished. We have motor installed. As you can see, nice clean rotation, nice and smooth, just the way you want it. You don't have the side-to-side free play, so your gear mesh is fine because we've used the sleeve. That's how important it is. Now, one of the final things you're going to want to do is make sure it's lubricated. Just depends on the step that you're on, but with the motor, just one tiny drop of oil, just right there on the bushing. A very small amount goes a long way. Same thing with the gears. You don't need to get crazy with lubricant here, but you do need a little bit. So I like this grease from Sucker Corner. Any PTFE grease, that'll work. And again, a little bit goes a long way. Now, if you're going to take this assembly, the wheel assembly out, and put it on the truer to true it up and do wheels and tires, then just wait to lubricate until after that. But if you've already done that step ahead of time, or you're not going to do it at all, then just make sure you lubricate. Anyway, I hope this has all helped you guys. It's a lot of fun working on these cars. It seems like a lot, but it really is kind of simple. Just takes a long time to try to show you. But anyway, look forward to your feedback, your comments online as always. I really look forward to those conversations. So we shall see you online.